Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. My guest today is Rhonda Britten. Rhonda is the founder of Fearless Living Institute, a best-selling author, Emmy Award-winning person on TV, and somebody who has actually spent years touching the lives of, I guess, thousands or maybe even tens or hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, with her approach to living a fearless life, and lots of wisdom, lots of insight, and a pretty powerful personal story. So awesome to be hanging out with you today.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So you're doing amazing things in the world right now and helping a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and at the same time building extraordinary business. That's, helping all those people. A lot of this was the culmination of an extraordinary, unusual, dramatic, and to a certain extent horrifying personal journey.
Yes.
So let's kind of start at
ground zero, so to speak, my ground zero?
Start at your ground zero,
yeah,
so that we can create some context for sort of like where you've come from and what's driving you.
It's a really good word, driving me, because this really is my passion, it's really my devotion, it's really my commitment, it's really my calling. And if I could have chosen a different calling, I would have. Once you hear my story, because I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it is mine, and I have come to terms with it, and I've become who I am because of it. And what you're referring to is when I was 14 years old, my parents were separating, and my father was coming out over to take us to Sunday brunch, Father's Day. And I don't know about you, but we grew up in a very, very lower middle class family. Going out to eat was a big deal. And so we got all dressed up, looking good. And my father comes over to pick us up, and me and my mom start walking out to the car. My sisters are in the bathroom fighting it out. And as my father gets to his car, he yells that I'm gonna get my coat. And he opens his trunk, and he doesn't grab his coat, but he grabs a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother. You made me do this. This is your fault. You made me do this. And he fires. Now, I am the only person out there with my mom and dad, and I start screaming, Dad, stop, Dad. I love you. I'm even screaming, I love you, trying to get his attention. And he pulls the trigger and shoots my mother. And then he cocks the gun again, and he points the gun towards me. And I literally was frozen, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and it's so vivid. It's like he blinked at me, and I blinked at him, and we just stood there. And my mother, literally with her arms around herself, with a bullet inside of her, starts screaming, don't. And my father takes that gun loaded for me and shoots my mother a second time. And that second bullet goes through my mother's abdomen and out her back, and for the next 20 minutes, all I heard was, and then my father comes running over, literally right next to me, puts the gun to his head and fires. So within a matter of 2 minutes, I was the sole witness to my father murdering my mother and committing suicide, and I was 14 years old. And I don't know how other people would respond to that, but I know how I did. I basically blame myself. I mean, I was the only one out there, right? I mean, and I did nothing heroic, right? I didn't grab the gun. I didn't jump in front of my mother. I didn't tackle my father to the ground. I didn't grab something and start hitting him. I mean, I literally was frozen and squeaked out, Daddy, stop, right? And so for the next 20 years, I absolutely didn't believe I had a right to be happy, because you can't be happy with your parents dead, especially your mother dead, and you didn't save her. And I, basically, if you want to think of it as that, I split in two, and I think many people live this way, is that, the outside, I was still a straight A student, played basketball, pretended everything was fine and dandy. I'm fine. And everybody's like, Rhonda's fine, right? But inside, I had such self-loathing and such self-hatred. And my negative self-talk was really, that I am just not good enough. And so, when I left for college and nobody knew my story, I lied about how my parents died. I started drinking. And for 14 years, from the day my father killed my mother till I quit drinking 14 years later, I had nightmares every single night. I couldn't go to sleep without my father coming into my dreams and shooting me all night long.
Did you share this with anybody along the way?
I went to therapy right after it happened. My sisters, they were, oh, got to send her to therapy. And I went to therapy, but sometimes I think, for some people, let's just put it this way, especially I grew up in Upper Michigan, Upper Minnesota, you know, if my arm was broken off, my mother would have still been like, wash the dishes. You know, I mean, you don't, right? You don't, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with me, right?
So you grew with kind of like this stoic.
Well, I just wanted to pretend it didn't happen, right? I just wanted to pretend that it was going to be fine, and I was going to be fine, and I didn't know how to help myself, and I did go to therapy, and I remember one therapist looking at me and going, you know, because I was still so active and still did great in school, you know, still got a full ride to scholarship to college, and she looked at me, and I'll never forget this. She looked at me, she goes, well, it sounds like you're doing really great. And it's like I wanted, you know, because I went in presenting myself as great, right? Like, well, I got this thing, my father killed my mother, killed himself, but I'm fine. And she literally said to me, it sounds like you're doing great. And I was like, man, you gotta bust me. You know, I went away from that therapy session so devastated. You know, so I woke up every morning with bullets coming out of my body. I tried to kill myself 3 times, became an alcoholic. And it was after that 3rd suicide attempt that I realized I wasn't good at killing myself, and I have to figure this out. And so I read the books, I did all the self-help, you know, I tried. I mean, I was into self-help when I was 12, you know. I was gonna be a minister when I was 14. So I was doing all this stuff, but nothing, they gave me tools, right? I had some cathartic experiences, right? But nothing made me feel in the middle of the night that I was okay. I could act like I was okay. I had more tools to look like I was okay. But inside here, I didn't feel okay. So out of sheer desperation, I started, after my 3rd suicide attempt and coming back from the psych ward, because that's where they evaluate you after you try to kill yourself 3 times, and I realized nobody was coming to save me.
How old were you at this point?
I was 28.
So it was literally 14 years of
nightmares every night,
right.
Alcohol. I quit drinking when I was 28.
Yeah.
It's so funny, you know, God works so interestingly, because within a month of quitting drinking, boyfriend breaks up with me, I get a car accident, so I can't, like my face is smashed up. Like I was literally in isolation. And it was me and my dad. And we had it out, and the whole forgiveness story that I could share at some point if you'd like. But it was when I really realized that I had to save myself and that I had to figure this out. And that's when I started making up exercises for myself. And shockingly, they worked, and it really was the beginning of what's now Fearless Living. But I wasn't thinking about anybody but saving my own life, right? So when you hear me speak, or when you work with me or read any of my books or anything like that, I don't talk from a perspective of I studied all this stuff. Don't get me wrong, I've studied it now and know a lot of information, but it's really from personal experience. Because I know too many people that life looks good, but they still wonder, what's my problem? Like, why am I not good enough? Why can't I make this happen? Why can't I lose weight? Here I am really successful over here, but why can't I lose weight? Why can't I get a guy? I'm really successful over here. Or why am I happily married and can lose weight, but I can't start a business, right? So everybody's got their place where, like, what's wrong with me? And what I've really discovered is that once you understand how fear works, really fundamentally to layman, once you understand how fear works, life really makes sense.
So, and I actually want to go deeper into that, but I don't want to leave behind what you described as the forgiveness story, because my sense is nobody has the story that you have, and God willing, like most people won't. But so many people do have their own story, and so many people have a story which involves some level of estrangement or alienation from a parent or from a loved one or from somebody who they wanted desperately to approve of them, to accept them, and never did. And they carry that with them through life, and it affects them in so many different ways. So even though they haven't suffered, they haven't been through your story, they have their own variation of struggle around something similar, And I wonder if the way that you process what you're calling your forgiveness story would be in some way informative or helpful to them.
Yeah, and it came in layers, but I'll tell you two pieces of it. You know, like I shared, my father haunted my dreams every night for 14 years. And when I quit drinking, it was just me and my dad, right? And my dad kind of lived in my closet. And I remember lying in bed, couldn't have a drink, car accident, sober, no boyfriend, no distractions, and me and my dad. And I just started screaming at him, like, why can't you leave me alone? Why can't you just leave me alone? It's been 14 years, twice as long. You know, I was 14 when you killed Mom, and now it's 14 more years. Why can't you leave me alone? And my father just stayed there. I could just feel him. I didn't physically see a ghost or anything, but I could feel him. And he just didn't move. And I was like, and I remember just starting to cry. And a thought went through my head, a very odd thought, actually. The thought went through my head, if you can't beat him, join him. If you can't beat him, join him. That's the thought that went through my head. And so I said, Dad, come over here. And my dad came over next to me, and I was sitting on the bed, and he kind of got on his knees. And I said, Dad, I forgive you. And I just cried in his arms, and he whispered in my ear, that's what I've been waiting for. And I cried myself to sleep that night. My nightmare started the same, my father shooting me. And finally, I just look at him, I turn around my face, and I go, just go ahead. I'm not gonna run one, just go ahead, kill me. And I literally put my arms out, and I said, just do it. And he shot at me, didn't hit me. Looked at his gun, loaded it again, shot at me again, didn't hit me. Looking at his gun, puts more bullets in, shoots at me, misses again. And he looks at his gun, he throws it down. There's a little tiny wall right next to him. He leans over the wall, grabs a picnic basket, goes, do you want to have a picnic? I said, yeah. And my father pulls out the red and white checkered tablecloth, puts it on the floor, and we eat bread. And I haven't had a nightmare since. And, you know, I had surrendered. You know, and I think when it comes to forgiveness, we don't want to surrender because we think that we're inviting more bad things. We don't know if we're going to be happier.
I think we also, there's a perception that that's weakness.
It's weak, right? It's weak. And so we'd rather be unhappy with regret than actually get our life back, right? But it feels, and I know in the body, you know, people intellectually know they have to forgive. You know, some people know
right.
intellectually, but their body, and I just want to touch on this, is that our body, literally it feels like it's going to die if it doesn't. So I get the jump people have to make from an intellectual understanding to a visceral solution. You know, you can't solve, I believe, a visceral problem with an intellectual answer. You have to have a visceral solution. Yeah. So here, you know, I was willing to kind of get in the mud with my dad, right? I was willing to get on my knee. I was willing to accept him. I was willing to love him anyway. I was willing to let the upset victim, you know, pain go. And that was really the catalyst for me setting myself free. And, you know, there's different layers of forgiveness. I've forgiven my father many times over the last, 20 years. And I think, the fallacy is that you forgive once and, you as you grow, you're hitting the edge of a new place and you have to forgive in that place. And then you grow and then you have to forgive in that place. Me getting married, when I got married, I had to forgive my mother and my father for not being there. When I got divorced, I had to forgive my mother and my father again, right? When I, different places in my life, I've had to...
It's not such a moment, it's a process.
It's a process, but as you evolve, you have to open yourself up, right? So So I think forgiveness is a critical component, to set yourself free, really viscerally. But again, I wanna emphasize that I get your body literally feels like you must die. And I say, let it die. Let it die, because you will be reborn.
I think that's so hard. Sitting here listening to your story and listening to you, I'm thinking, well, it makes perfect sense. But I've got to imagine that actually doing it is brutally hard, because it means letting go, very likely, of something that's defined a big part of who you are, very often for years. And that's brutally hard.
It is. It feels like you're nobody and nothing. It literally feels like I said, you're going to die. And so, I think, again, one of the fallacies is that you do it once. And forgiveness to me is a daily practice. You cut somebody off in traffic, right? You want to make them wrong and bad, but really you have to forgive yourself for being impatient, forgive yourself for, not being whole enough and complete enough, right? Like, it's a constant willingness to purify yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because there's a tie-in with self-righteousness. And just like the littlest things in the day. It's like, I remember the neighborhood where I live, there are stop signs, and there's a little traffic bump that goes halfway across the road. And I remember pulling up to a stop sign, and I stop, and the guy behind me goes flying around the outside of me and around the outside of the bump so he can just cruise by, blows past the stop sign. I'm like, bro, who the hell is this person? And I'm like, I'm trying to catch up. I'm he has not changed or impeded my progress in any meaningful way. I'm pursuing him out of a sense of righteous indignation, which is affecting me and his action affected me in no way, except for the fact that I couldn't let go. The fact that he wasn't following the rules that I was following.
Well, we all want to be important and special. We all want to be important, special, and seen, right? And him going around you, self-righteous, yes, but you weren't important enough to be honored, right?
It's like, who are you?
Right?
That,
you weren't special,
I have to wait.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're all wanting that feeling of importance, to be seen, to feel special, to feel like we matter, to feel like our lives matter. And all of these little insults all day long. Our boss invites somebody else to go out for a drink. Our mate forgets to tell us what they're doing. All of these little things, little barbs and little insults saying, you're not important, you're not important, you're not important. Even though logically and rationally all during the day we can be like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Eventually, unless you're in touch with that experience, it's going to accumulate. It's going to accumulate. Right. And you're going to blow. In whatever way you blow, right? So to be attentive to your emotional life on a daily basis and not use your head necessarily to rationalize, but to use your head to help you understand and get in touch with your emotions allows you to be more whole.
That makes sense. So let's kind of circle back to this moment where you hit a point where you start to really hone in on this idea of fear as being the key.
Yes. It was literally like the light went off. I'll never forget it. It was like, everybody talks about fear, right? Fear is in the self-help and the leadership and the business, building your business. Oh, fear is the biggest reason why we don't open our business. Fear is the reason you're not in love. Fear. We kind of blow off the word fear. And everybody says, get over your fear, conquer it, get past it, right? Get over it, and squash it, smash it in the face, right? And in reality, that just perpetuates fear. And so you actually, what I started really recognizing is that fear is your greatest ally and your greatest friend. And all of these people who kind of spout off fear, they don't really actually know how it works, not really. And again, I love everybody's work that talk about it in whatever way they can, but unless you really understand it from your own life, right, how it works for you in your own life, it just becomes a theoretical exercise if it can't apply to you. So, I'm a neuroscience geek. I know all about the amygdala and the hippocampus, and I know how the fear systems work from an instinct place, from a physical place, as well as an emotional. I know that the brain doesn't tell the difference between physical and emotional fear. I know that we inherit some of our fears from our ancestors. I mean, I know a lot about fear, but that doesn't help me in the middle of a fight with a loved one, right? It doesn't help me to go, my amygdala's fired, it doesn't help me, right? I don't have perspective, I don't understand. So when I started to really start seeing everything through the eyes of fear and seeing how our values can be served in fear. Our values can be used in service to fear of freedom. Our belief systems can be used in service to fear of freedom. Everything. Fear is as smart as you are, as educated as you are, as spiritual as you are, and it is slippery and tricky, and it has one goal and one goal only, to keep you safe. And it loves you, and it adores you, and it just sees you as 2, 5, 12, 18, just sees you as incapable because you've kept on telling it you're incapable. You've kept giving your power to fear. You've kept letting fear just make your decisions for you. So every time that you don't make the decision, every time you don't trust yourself, fear is going, oh, I guess she needs me. I guess he needs me. I guess I got to get on the field, got to make this one, got to make it. So it literally, unless you can distinguish it from you and see it for the mechanism it is, because it's just a mechanism. I call it a mechanism. And I like to say it's not in me, it's a mechanism that comes upon me just to kind of get that space, right, between me and fear. But once you get that fear is literally as smart as you are, educated and spiritual as you are, and it uses your values and your belief systems to serve it, then you really start understanding the slippery, seductive, insidious nature of fear and its complete devotion to keep you safe.
Do you distinguish between fear of failure versus fear of judgment versus fear of the unknown versus fear of loss? Is it all in your mind? Because a lot of we share so much interest around this topic. It was a lot of what my last book was about. And from what I saw, those different fears create a similar reaction in your brain, a similar emotional and a similar behavioral response. But they affect your life differently in terms of mobilizing and paralyzing. Even though if you actually looked at the scans. If you put somebody in an fMRI, the same part of the brain is going to light up, but the output behavior will be different.
That's right. And that's exactly right. So when you use fake, there's flight, fight, freeze, and now they've added fake, responses are the generalizations of how we respond to fear, right? Yeah. But my whole belief, my whole model of what I call the wheel of fear and the wheel of freedom is that fear is individualized, personalized, and unique. So if we're in compare mode, which of course is based in fear, if I have to compare myself to you, then I'm wanting to see, well, you do it this way, then maybe I do it for the same reason, right? Like I'm wanting to find some justification. But when you start understanding that the wheel of fear, again, is personalized, individual, and unique, and your job is to understand what I call your wheel of fear. You're not over there anymore. I'm not over there with you anymore, right? I'm just paying attention to my own behavior, my own insights, my own evolution, right? And so I'm starting to have higher awareness, which we all know that we need. You have to slow down. One of my mottos is in order to go fast, you have to go slow. I would say the new fast is going slow, right? So it's like you have to go as slow as possible. And what I believe is that what I've seen over and over again, let's just put it this way, what gives people a pathway to master their fear, okay, is starting to recognize that they have one core fear that drives their other fears. So you might your core fear might be fear of looking like a loser, feeling like a loser. Your core fear might be unlovable, right? Your core fear might be worthless, failure, right? So it can be something. But whatever that core fear is, it springs into action, 5, 10, 15, 20 other fears, okay? And what I've seen time and time again is that when somebody can really look at their life through the lens of the wheel of fear and see their core fear for what it is. Let's say you, because people go to coaching for what? They go to coaching for, I call the symptoms of fear, the fear responses. I'm not going for my core fear. I'm going because I procrastinate. I'm going because I'm a perfectionist. I'm going because, I worry too much and I feel guilty. I compare, I complain. That's why I go to coaching. That's why I go to therapy. That's why I go to workshops. I'm trying to solve a fear response. I'm trying to solve a symptom of my core fear. And what I help people do is see that once you can see your core fear for what it is, and again, remember, fear is slippery, slidey, and doesn't want you to see it, all those fears that are on top of it, like the 10, 20, 30, whatever, how many you got, the fear responses, my experience is over and over again, 30% to 35 to 40% just literally disappear the minute you recognize it. Because it's like, you get why you're doing it. You don't have to do it anymore. And the other 40 to 50 to 60%, once you start seeing it for what it is, you can then, what I call the wheel of freedom, you can start accessing those parts of yourself that you've cut out because of fear. You've had to cut off a part of yourself because you can't expose that part of you anymore. You learned a long time ago that that is not safe to do. And that part of you that if you have completely denied, pretend you do not have it, cannot even contemplate even looking at it, because if you do something bad's gonna happen. Once you start embracing that wholeness of you, and what I call the wheel of freedom, once you start embracing that wholeness, then that can be used in service to help you see all those symptoms for what they are. And then the symptoms literally start decreasing. And so now you really maybe only have a little perfectionism stuff, and maybe only have, a little procrastination, but you get it. It no longer owns you. And one of the benefits of understanding fear, as I know, it's eliminating the why. Like, there's no more why. So when somebody is like, why can't I get this done? Why can't I do this? There literally is no more why, because it's because of fear. That's why. The answer is fear. So you don't have to sit there and go, why me? Why did that? Why? I mean, we have 100 stories that could point to why, right? And my motto always is, you don't ever have to go look for your past to find the solution. If you're on your path towards freedom and being true to yourself and being who you're meant to be and doing your passion, your purpose, your mission, if something needs to be healed, it will come up. You don't have to go look for it. It will come up, and you will have to face it. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm sure
it does. And and it'll keep cycling back, And then the big lingering question is, how do you find that big core fear? How do you process it? Because there are a lot of roads, and there are a lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas, and a lot of people still struggle peeling back the layers. And my sense is that people will automatically default to the superficial ones because it's easier.
Absolutely.
Than going deep and saying, oh, that's the darkness that I actually have to go into.
Yes, that's right. And what I always tell people, you have your best wheel of fear, your core fear, when you have one of these 4 responses. You might have the response of, right? You might start crying, right? Another response is, I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't me. This isn't me. I can't do this. No, this isn't me,
it's
right?
Like total denial.
Total denial.
Yeah.
The other one is confusion. I don't get it, right? And the other response is, you're going to have a visceral response when you smack up against your core fear. And so, yes, I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people now and have developed, a pathway to help you do that. So I've created a series of exercises that help you, and it's a process, so we can go deeper, deeper, deeper. And before we even ever get to the wheel of fear, I actually have you do this prep work that helps you start unraveling yourself, so that when you get to the wheel of fear and that work that we do together, you don't have that resistance, right? You don't have to find the perfect one, right? You're surrendered to find the one that's yours, right? Not the pretty one,
right. So let me break up a question here that my guess is that some of the people who are watching this are going to be having in the back of their mind. So let's kind of deal with it up front, which is that you've been through a horrendous early life experience.
Sucks.
You developed through a lot of studying, a lot of learning, a lot of your own experimentation and contemplation and reflection, a process that works incredibly well for you and now for other people. And then some people are going to look at us in this conversation and say, interesting, but who is she? She's not, I don't see an MD after
That's
her
right.
name or psychology,
Yes.
So why would I think it's important to explore the idea of credentialing and your ability to offer value, and also because I think on one side people are looking for, I want to buy into what Rhonda's saying, which she doesn't have these initials after name. And then on the other side,
that's a fear, by the way.
Right.
That's a fear. If you need credentialing, whenever I speak, and usually there's like one person out of 2,000. One person will come to me and go, what degree do you have?
Right.
And I'm always like, you're not ready, because, look, when you're ready, you don't care what credentials I have. All you want is the answer, right? But yeah, I mean, there was no coaches when I started. I started coaching 2 decades ago, right? Thomas Leonard from, Coach U at the time had barely started his class. I don't even know if he had started yet, right? So there was no coaches, and I was actually mentored by a coach from a long line of, really awesome coaches. I have a spiritual practitioner certification license. I went to ministerial school, so, and I'm a lay person that I study everything and go everywhere and do everything. But really, it's that it works and that I did it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like all that other stuff that you just said is like,
that's nice.
It's kind of like, but I mean, to me, it's when I look at somebody like you, my big question is, okay, so she doesn't have a degree in neuroscience, psychology, or something like that. But so what else can I hang my hat on to buy into the fact that what she's saying is valid? And then I look at the body of work, and then I look at proof, and I look at evidence, and that to me is always a bigger indicator. Because the flip side is, there are plenty of people out there with a lot of initials after their names who are hugely ineffective at what they've been certified and licensed and accredited to do. So it's always, I mean, I want to bring the question into this conversation because I think it's an important one. That I think sometimes, if I'm going to a neurosurgeon, I want to know that they're actually an MD and they've done 1,000 of these procedures.
Absolutely.
And they've been highly trained for decades.
That's right.
But there's so many other areas of our lives where people can really help us. And we push them back because they don't have the golden credential that we've been told represents capability.
Yes.
Rather than saying, okay, that's one thing that could tell me that this person has value to add to me, but it's one indication of proof. There may be others, and a big other is that I'm open to the fact that I'm willing to be helped, but also that somebody has demonstrated through outcomes that what they have to offer really helps.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits that I receive from people is that they trust me because I know how hard it is to be alive. I don't care how happy and successful you are on the outside. There are days you don't want to get up either, and there are moments that are just like, are you kidding me? And I'm very frank and very open about my journey through this life. Even after Fearless Living, you read my blog and everything, I'm open, just that you're very open as well. And it's like, I think it's like, if you resonate with me, if you resonate with you, you have to find the person that you resonate with, that's your teacher or your, your pathway, right? But I always find it fascinating, the whole thing about credentialing. And it really does become about, would you rather save your life and go with somebody that you're totally resonating with, or do you want to pick the safe bet, right, and go with the credentialed? And I have a little thing, like I always say, real estate agents, therapists, coaches, actors, we're all the same. 60% of us are mediocre at best. 20% of us are good, right? We're good. 15% of us are, really good, really good. And there's 5% that really are the way showers and the excellent and the people that are really blazing the path. And that's the true in whatever field you go into.
Totally agree.
So, so you have to find the 5% if you want to work with the best. But there's a lot of great coaches out there, a lot of great therapists. And I love therapy. I go to therapy. I'm a big therapy person.
And to make it clear too, I'm not bashing it, and you're not bashing people who have 5 initials after their names, people who have PhDs and multiple degrees. There's no. It's not saying don't go to see those people. They could be, but I think what what you just shared is the important thing, is that whether you have a degree or a certification or a license or whatever, or nothing, look for the 5%. And to me, it's always, the biggest piece of proof is the outcomes. Like, look at the body of work, look at the outcomes, and then what you were saying, does this person resonate with me on a visceral level? Do I get a feeling on an intuitive level that this person can help me?
Yeah, if you're hearing, when they hear you speak, if they hear, yes, Jonathan gets me, then, follow Jonathan. If you're hearing me and it's like, yes, Rhonda, then great. It doesn't matter. And you're going to switch. That's the thing too. It's like, work with Jonathan for a while, then work with me, and then work with so-and-so, and then work with the, it all works together, but it's about following the yes inside of you. It's always guiding you in fearlessness. And then fear comes in and tells you a story about it. Fear is the one that says, well, what about her? What about her? What do you need? What do you, what am I, so it's like, no, fear, remember, always wants to keep you safe. And in fear definition, that's the same, stuck, and small.
Right. So let me ask you this question. And this is in the context of entrepreneurs. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, founders. One of the most troubling, one of the biggest struggles that any entrepreneur, especially on startup stage, first couple of years, deals with, is that starting and building a company is not a smooth line. Like, hey, we started, everything's going great, and it's not a smooth growth curve.
No.
There are major jags,
That's
and
right.
there is nobody who gets out without going through the gauntlet numerous times.
That's right.
And one of the hardest questions that any founder will ever deal with is when you're in that place where you're up against the wall, you're running out of runway, your cash is low, you're like your venture capitalist, or your bootstrap, your bank account is low. You still think that this thing is viable, but you're really starting to doubt yourself, and you can't sleep at night. You've got a feeling in the pit of your gut every single day, and you're terrified. And you're trying to figure out, is that physical feeling, do I translate that as a signpost that this matters to me so deeply that I must go, and it's telling me this is the thing I can't not do, or is it telling me, schmuck,
quit, get a job.
Right.
You're
You're
putting your family at risk.
You gave it your all, but now all the data is in. It's showing you it was a bad move from the beginning. It's time to fold. So how do I translate what I'm feeling into yes, move forward, or no, you've given it your best, it's time to fold?
I can help you with that. I think for most people is that is the critical question. They don't know who to trust or what to trust. Is the gut telling them to leave, or to leave, fold, or to stay with it? And I think that one of the reasons it's so difficult is that people have given false impressions of what it's like to live in fear, right? In a powerful place of fear, like fear really motivating you and supporting you. I always say fear is a great motivator, but it will never let you be satisfied. So, it'll always motivate you. You're starving, you could go bank, fear is going to motivate you to get to work, but you always have to translate that fear into a powerful force for you, otherwise it'll eat you alive, right? So I think one of the challenges, there's so many kind of airy-fairy feelings about fear, like, I've heard, well, it's fearless, or no, it's freedom when you feel really good, right? Or you feel expansive, right? And fear always makes you constricted. Well, that place that you're describing is constrictive no matter what the answer is, right? It's shutting you down no matter what. So I think some of the most fearless actions and the most freedom-based actions, you can still feel sick to your stomach and want to throw up, right? So the feeling of expansiveness versus restriction, I think is too simplified. It's too simplified answer. So this is what I say. I always say that the wheel of fear, the wheel of freedom, fear and freedom. And I don't care if you say freedom is God, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, your higher self, your essential nature, your true self, again, whatever you want to call it. I think the moment comes that the fear and freedom can both tell you no and both tell you yes, because that's the other fallacy. Fear always says no and freedom always says yes. That's not true either. So you can be in that moment where you're against the wall, and fear could be telling you no, and freedom could be telling you no, per se. Like, you think it's, which one is it? And this is the distinction. Fear will always add shame to the equation. Freedom won't add shame. So freedom may say, you really got to pack it in. You got what you needed, and now move on. Fear will say, well, you knew it wasn't going to work anyway. I mean, come on. I mean, look at your history, right? So fear, when it tells you no, there's always shame attached. And freedom says yes or no, and it's just literally like, it's time to move on, or it's time to stay. No matter how you feel right now, it's the right choice. And then when you decide to trust yourself in that moment, you don't feel shame, you just really feel like, yeah, I'm supposed to keep going, even though I feel like throwing up. If in that moment you can say, I'm going to trust this more than the throwing up, you then do get a sense of relief and a sense of calm, and you can lean back and be energized again and have clear thinking and move forward, right? So it's really, fear always adds shame. Fear always tells you in some way that you're not good enough, and freedom never tells you that.
Interesting. I need to let that sink in. Yeah, I mean, because it's just such a pervasive question that comes to me on such a regular basis from entrepreneurs and founders.
Yes.
And I've asked so many people
Yes.
how they handle it, and the response has almost always been some variation of, you just know. You just know, you can, like, you'll know if it's, and I'm like, you just don't actually. I mean, and you need some more tools, but I've never been satisfied. So this adds something new that I really need to think on, because that's interesting. It gives you something else to look for also.
Well, it also, is it smart to work with somebody and have them ask you questions? Of course, you're going to say, like, did you do the best you can? And have you given it your all? And where do you have control and where don't you have control? And, you're going to ask all those wonderful questions. But really, it's like, is there shame or no shame? So if you're embarrassed to stop, you very well may have to stop, right? Because that embarrassment's going to make the decision for you. Embarrassment can't make the decision for you, right? The fear of failing can't make the decision for you, right? What will people think of me can't make the decision for you. It cannot make the decision. You will not be clean, and you will not choose the one that is really yours to do. So if you use any of those aspects of fear to make the decision, you may go down, quote unquote, the path that's not meant for you. But this is what I know to be true as well, Jonathan, is even if you go down that path, it's going to come right back, and it's going to, because if you are on a path of freedom, even though you get caught in fear once in a while, like the best of us do, you will be set free. You will set yourself free. It may not be today, it might be a year from now, 6 months from now, but you'll readjust. So even that, going to the level when you really understand freedom, can you fully and completely trust yourself? Trust that internal knowingness, and trust that freedom within, trust the God within, the intuition, again, whatever your beliefs are. Trust your essential nature. That is guiding you each and every moment. So even though you get caught up over here for a few minutes or a year, it doesn't matter. You're going to find yourself again, because that's your devotion, your commitment, and your path.
Yeah. And I think also, I completely believe that. And I also think that when you frame it as, I'm destined to go down paths that are going to be the wrong ones, and so let me make those decisions, let me make those choices that take me in the wrong direction now. Let me go there quickly, but keep a mindset the whole time saying, I think this is right, but I'm open to the possibility that it's not, and I'm willing to correct course, when I get enough information to realize that, okay, this was wrong. And that, in fact, the biggest fear that I've seen around this is that people are like, well, then I've lost a year or 6 months or 5 years of my life. It's like, no, you haven't lost anything.
I always say, look, you have the rest of your life.
Right.
You have the rest of your life.
And what you've gained is whatever that window of time was, extraordinary experience, wisdom, intuition. You've gained data.
And you also gained tools that you need, ways to be. So I think of myself, God didn't tell me like, oh, Rhonda, you're going to become an inspirational speaker and write books and change people's lives and come up with a fear tool that's going to end all fear tools. He didn't tell me that. When I was younger, what did he do? He used my ego in service to my greater mission. And God goes, hey, Rhonda, ego-driven, I think you should become an actress. I think you should follow the arts, right? So I be an actress, I do commercials, all that stuff, learn about camera work, blah, blah, blah. 5 years, 6 years into that, I'm like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I really get it. I'm like, I'm not supposed to. And now, mind you, I devoted my life to do this, and I wake up going, I'm not supposed to do this. I go through 2 years of the desert not knowing what the heck I'm supposed to do with my life, right? And this is when all this stuff started happening. And I hesitantly started doing this stuff because I didn't think I had a right to do this stuff. I didn't have a PhD. I remember going to my spiritual counselor and going, I can't do this. I know God gave me this mission, but I'm not supposed to do this. Who am I? She looked at me, she goes, you've been chosen and you must do it. And not chosen over anybody else, but this is your mission. You clearly, this is what yours to do. And so I think about all those years wasted, right? And why was I the first life coach on TV? Why have I done more TV than any other life coach in the world or any other therapist? Heck, I've done more TV than Jennifer Aniston. Why? Because all those years I learned how to do TV. So when I got in front of the cameras, I was at home, right? So I always tell my clients, every single thing you've ever done in your life, relationship, job, you need to fulfill your destiny, and you have no idea how or why it's going to come into play, but I guarantee you, one of these days, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't care when it is, you will say, oh my God, thank God I did that, waitressing job, thank God I, bartended for those 2 years. I wouldn't have known what to do now,
Yeah.
So it's all working in your favor. Life is for you and working in your favor.
Yeah. And even the stuff that you had hoped wouldn't happen ends up serving you. I think there's a bit of an if. I think if you're open to the notion that there's value in it, and that if you're open to examining it and saying, what has this added to my experience that I can now, that will put me in a better place moving forward, that I can apply to decisions that I make from this point forward. If you're not, then I think it's just pain.
Right, but then you got a bigger problem, right?
Right.
It's like if you're not in love with your life, wherever it takes you. I mean, what I want for people is for them to wake up every morning so excited to be themselves. Like, I get to be Rhonda Britten all day. You get to be Jonathan you get to be all day long. Like, you get to do your life all day. And I want people to wake up with that feeling that they get to be themselves for the next 24 hours. They've been gifted. Like, how great that they get to be their life, And so when you get that this is your life, no one can really live it. And it is your charge to do what is meant for you and your life. And whatever path that is part of your life. And when you can embrace, this is your life. Like, nobody gets to do nobody gets to do you. It's like then there can be a relaxation and a level of trust. Because all of that, like, this was a waste of time, is all lacking trust. There's no trust, right? There's doubt. You believe the world's against you. I always ask the question, is the world for you or against you? And people know the right answer. They know they're supposed to say the world's for me, right? But when they examine their behavior, they act as if the world's against them.
Yeah. No, very valid point. We could keep going for a long time. But I want to be just so respectful. And I've enjoyed this so much. But the name of this project is called Good Life Project. When I offer that term out to you, to live a good life, what comes up? Trust. And, one of the things that I believe wholeheartedly is that there is nothing wrong with you. It's only fear. And so when you want to self-deprecate, beat yourself up, believe that you can't do it, yes, you might need more tools or resources or support. You might need all those things. But to really get to the core of your being, how to have a good life, is to know that you are perfectly fine. Like really. And that you get to become who you're meant to be. And you get to be on that journey with yourself. And you get to decide every day how to support yourself to become who you're meant to be. You have a destiny, and your destiny will be fulfilled by your choices. So the good life is to really lean back and lean in that you get to do your life.
And it is a good life, regardless if your father murdered your mother and committed suicide, regardless if you had 3 suicide attempts, regardless if you've been an alcoholic, regardless of whatever else has happened to you. This is your good life. And when you can own that, your life will be good.
Yeah. I like that. So it's been a great conversation. I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your energy and your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. What a joy. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Jonathan Fields. My guest today has been Rhonda Britten, signing off for Good Life Project.